Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Hi, Karina. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Where do I start? Well, my name's Karina Halle, and I started writing in 2009. I wrote my first book. I've been writing before that. I went to school for journalism, and I was a music journalist and a travel journalist, and then did screenwriting before that. So writing novels was something that I always thought, like, a screenplay is to me is easy. It's usually 90 pages, and you know that there's a formula you have to stick to very strictly, and so it's kind of more mechanical in a way. And so I thought, oh, I'll never be able to write a novel. That's like way too long. How am I going to be interested in it for that long? But I had an idea, and then 2009, I wrote my first book in 6 weeks, and then people were like, "Oh, it's super fast." I'm like, it was. I had a job at the time, so I got up at 6 a.m. and I wrote from 6 to 7 before I left for work. And then I wrote sometimes at work, and then I wrote in the evenings. And I was just trying to make it a habit of doing it every day, which unfortunately that habit did not stick with me. But and then the next book I wrote was in 2010, and that actually took like a whole year to actually do it. And then it turned out like I could just write it in 2 weeks at the end of that year. So that's actually my writing process. It's more like think about the thing for like ages and procrastinate, and then finally write it. So anyways, I didn't actually self-publish until 2011 May, and by then I had 3 books in the series out. Already written. So I was able to put those out, and then I don't know, ever since that's what I've been doing. And I started off with a horror romance series, and I kind of morphed into romantic suspense and then into contemporary, which is where I primarily am right now, just writing contemporary romance.
I have to tell you, contemporary romance is like my jam. And so I discovered your writing in 2016, 2017, and I devour pretty much everything that you have written. And then, and then I took a detour, and I was like, I went back to it, and I was like, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? Like, I'm like, because I love that you put so much books out there, so there's like enough healthy backlist to go in.
But,
but it's tricky.
Sometimes people say it's too much. They're like, where do I'll see people comment all the time on other people's posts about me. Yeah. And generally what it is like, oh, I've been meaning to read her, but her backlist is so huge. It intimidates me. I have no idea where to start. So I'm like, I get that. But I'd also want to be like, just start with the book that this person's recommending.
Yeah.
It's just the easiest.
So it's a good segue. So I think I may do a backlist for you. I do for authors that have like a healthy backlist. I do like some episodes about Spotlight. So I'm going to do one for you because there's like a healthy backlist, and there's like different series. There's different things that you can go for.
That's awesome.
I would love to. And yeah, just start with the book that they're recommending.
Yeah. Don't overthink it.
No, not that serious. So what made you decide to self-publish as opposed to going through the traditional publish route?
Well, I self-published primarily because when I first, like I said, I was in 2009 when I first wrote the book, and my whole point was like, and it sounds like silly, but like when I first wrote that first book, I wanted that series to become a TV show. And that was kind of like like I said, I used to do screenwriting. So I was like, can I do this? Like, can I reverse this into it? Like, can I just write the book and then let's see what happens? So like, that was always like my plan. The second plan was obviously to get an agent and get it published. Well, a lot changed between 2009 and 2011. And that's when self-publishing just exploded. And then I saw, Amanda Hawking, she was like doing extremely well with her like paranormal series. And then obviously, I wasn't even aware of 50 Shades of Grey, what that was, until 2012. So like that didn't even occur to me. Like it was just, I was watching other people self-publish, and I was like, wow, I could just do that and, not get an agent and not have to like go through the traditional process. Because in my head, and I'm such an impatient person by nature, that I was like, ghosts are in right now, as if like they ever never were, but like ghosts were in right now, and YouTube is a big thing. And again, remember this is like 2011, and I was like, you know, that my show is about a pair of ghost hunters who do a YouTube show, so this will be perfect. And I need to publish it now because I don't want to get an agent and have to take that time and then have the agent trying to sell it, and then either it sells or it doesn't, and then I feel like I was like not jumping on the trend that I thought was going to happen. And now I realize, like 10 years later, totally irrelevant. But so I was like, you know, I'm just going to do it myself. And so I read everything I could basically in 2010 and 2011 about how to self-publish, like all the books that were available, everything I could know about like all the different venue formats and retailers, etc. And then that's why I decided to do it that way. I actually never queried for an agent, so I didn't have to do anything like that, which is great. And then I naturally got my agent in 2012 when my series started getting attention, and then an agent out of New York who, in like looking back, I was like, wow, he represents like Martin Sheen and like famous like football and basketball players, and like I'm just like, why is he interested in like what I'm doing? And so that was kind of his like first foray into self-publishing too. So what he basically was, he's like, I'll be your agent, and you know, I'll handle like foreign sales, and I'll try and get you feature deals and stuff. And he did a great job. And I ended up getting a book deal for Sins and Needles a couple months after that, first self-published in 2013. So it took like a couple years, but I mean, I kind of got on that track. And then ever since then, I've just been doing traditional publishing and self-publishing.
I love this. And so what do you like about being a hybrid? Like, is there any plus or minuses within one area that you like best, or that both are helping you just get you to your goal?
Well, like honestly, it's tough because, and it's not tough being a hybrid, but it's tough trying to figure what you like more, what you want to do more. In the past, I would have said, well, ideally, you know, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. But the problem is that indie romance readers and people who read traditional are completely different. They're not the same audience. One audience, you know, is the KU crowd and indie, and they like a very specific trope by very specific authors. And if you're not writing that trope or you're not that author, it's really hard to break through. And I'm speaking as myself, who I don't always write these specific tropes, and I'm not always the author that's, you know, popular at the moment. So like for me, it can still be a real struggle to self-publish, and that's the honest truth. And I think most self-published authors would totally agree with that. But on the other hand, with traditional, you know, you do have, I hate to say like you have more freedom, but like, because, you know, for a lot of people are like go to self-publishing because they weren't able to get what they wanted to do traditionally. And that I understand, but there's a difference between selling a book and like, there's a difference between being like, okay, you know, I know no traditional publisher is going to pick up my, you know, MC romance series. So I'm going to self-publish it. But that doesn't mean that you're still going to find the audience. Like sometimes the traditional publishers are correct in their assumptions about the audience. And most of the time they might be wrong, but it's just because traditional and readers and indie readers are just, they really are totally different things. And I can tell you, like when I signed with Atria and I had 2 romances out with them, that was kind of when new adult was at its peak. And I guess they were new adult romances. They were travel based, and I'm really proud of those books. But the price point, they marketed it all wrong. And I hate to put all the blame on the publisher, but I'm going to with this one because they marketed it all wrong. They said that you know, your fans, because they bought me because of my fan base. They said your fans will buy this book because you wrote it. But then they priced the book at like $9, and it's like, no, they're not going to. Like, and so that's the thing. They lost that audience because they priced the book too high. And I, you know, when then at the point where it's almost cheaper to get the paperback, and I was like, okay, that's not going to fly. But I mean, that was not my decision. And then when they did the marketing, they were marketing to that crowd that's not going to buy it, and they didn't market to the traditional readers that might have taken a chance on it. But the problem is then the traditional readers weren't really that interested in romance or new adult, and they're still not really. I mean, rom-coms have like a huge resurgence right now, and the fact that it's kind of bordering on chick lit, and that's my next traditional thing is with that, but is in that genre, and that's doing really well. And so like I have more hopes for my upcoming books with Berkeley because of that. But like back then, it was a little bit iffy. So I mean, when it comes to like being a hybrid, you kind of have to check your expectations a bit and realize that the publishers don't know everything, and then sometimes you might know better, and they might not listen to you because they're very set in their ways, and things are changing very rapidly, so they're usually left behind. So in the past I would have been like, okay, well, let's let's do more self-publishing and less traditional. Now I kind of want to get away from self-publishing because it's getting to be too stressful. It's harder now these days, and I'd rather do something with a publisher instead. That said, like I'll never stop self-publishing. Like it is fun for me because I'm a very, like I said earlier, impatient person. I have an idea. I want to do it now. I want to publish now. I want the cover now. I want everything now. I want to write it now and release it now. And like I can do that as a self-published author, and you can't do that as traditional. So like it's more like hurry up and write it and then just wait, forever for it to be released, because that's just the way they have to do it with regards to getting the bookstores, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one kind of like thing for me where I'm a bit like, I want to lean more into traditional, but like you have to get used to having a lot of patience, and then that things move slower. But there's a lot of value in both, and I really think that just being able to go from one to another kind of keeps your career a little bit more exciting, a little bit more alive. And so if you have that option to be a hybrid, I think that's one of the best things, is that you have more options in general.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I've interviewed quite a few hybrids, and it's a great way to see the variety, because it gives you, like, if you're a hybrid, you can actually write, you may be contracted to write one certain type of novel, and then so self-publishing something completely different, and just gives you that flexibility and that
Exactly.
idea, that you can find audiences in different places. And like you said, the indie audience is very different from the traditional published audience, and
Yeah.
it's like you're targeting different places and
Yeah.
different people. So
Yeah.
so in terms of your writing, do you follow an outline, or do you see where the story leads you?
Oh, it all harks back to my screenwriting, and is that I always outline and I plot. I used to do a more detailed plot before I started, but I always know where this story is going. There's like a chance that like I might just know the first few chapters, and I'll write those, and then I'll hit a wall, and then I have to flesh out the rest. But in general, like I know how many chapters the book is and what happens in each chapter, and that will be fully fleshed out at some point in the book. So like I never pants it, and that's why I can write so fast and I can have edits so fast, is because like I know basically, like for me, when I write a draft, which is barely a draft, it tends to be that I never take things out. So there's never anything unnecessary in the book. Every single scene and chapter is there for a reason, and that's because I plotted it ahead of time. So I knew what needed to go where. If anything, I might be missing something. So usually in edits, like there might be like, okay, you need to clarify the scene, or you need to add another chapter here or something to show this and blah, blah, blah. So I think because I outline and I plot, that allows me to do that pretty fast. If I was a pantser, like for me personally, like my brain needs the structure. So I would hate to see what that book would look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like there's some people who can pants their way and they can just like go for it. And
Yeah.
then for me, it's like outline structure needs to know what's gonna happen, and it just
Yeah.
gives me some cadence or like what to
Yeah.
expect.
And it
Yeah.
lets you be flexible still. Like there's many times where I've been like I remember writing specifically like what book was it? Bold Tricks. I think the third one in the Artist trilogy. And Camden and Ellie were supposed to get back together, I think, halfway through the book because they went through so much shit. Or they're at least like the sex scene wasn't supposed to be halfway through the book. And but it just, I had written it that way in the outline, and then when it happened earlier, it's just because it just naturally happened. And I was like, well, this should just do it here. and then they did. So I mean, that's usually what happens, is like something will happen something feels natural in the chapter that's happening. I won't force it, like I won't stop it. I'll just go with the flow. And I think that's actually great, because once I have that structure in there, I just know it's flexible enough to, like, I can just go where the characters take me, and that's always fun.
That's always fun. Yeah. So how do you develop your characters? Like, do they come to you? Do you write them down? Like, how is the process of developing the characters?
Um, usually, usually I'll think of, if I mean, ideas come to me in different ways. So I think of the plot first,
Mm-hmm.
or the trope, or however you want to call it, or the
Mm-hmm.
idea. I think of that first, and then I think of the characters. And so, what character does this require? What character would make this interesting? So they kind of come that way. But sometimes the character comes first,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's based on, it could be based on anything. Like, it could be based on someone in real life. Like, I was on Twitter and I saw someone being retweeted, and she's a mortician. She was like a young, pretty blonde mortician, and her name was so perfect. I'm like, her name is Samantha Bone, and I was like, this person is like a great character for something, even though she's a real person, and obviously you're not going to copy, her name or anything, but like just that inspiration right there, I was like, man,
Yeah.
that would be a great character. So sometimes you see real life people and you just kind of have to twist things around, and sometimes they're just kind of based on like who you think the character needs to be and who the hero needs to be. And usually, actually, I think in the romance, I think of the hero first, and then I build the heroine around him, like trying to see who would be a good match, who would be more interesting, what would be more conflict, that kind of thing.
I love this. And so your book's setting takes a precedent. Like, I feel like your books are taking me to a different country, a different experience. Like, I have to tell you, I love Lisbon. Like, that's actually one of my favorite cities. So
You
reading
do.
the one that got away was just like, I was just like travel. Like, it took me. And so what's your process like? Because I know we can't travel now, but I'm assuming you have traveled extensively to get to place settings in different places, like in
Well,
your
I've
novels.
been to so many places that they already, like, I try not to write where I haven't been. That's not to say I haven't done that. I have, but
Yeah.
um I try to write to where I've been. So I was in Lisbon last year, and so I knew everywhere I go, I know I'm going to set a book there.
Mhm.
So my trips also are also work. They're also research and just soaking up the atmosphere. So that's basically it. Like, I'll be in the place, and then I'll write about it after. Maybe it'll take a few years. Like, I had spent a couple years ago a week in Corsica, and we loved it. And
Mhm.
there was a book that I was supposed to write set there, and I don't know if that book will happen. It was like a novella or something that was for a publisher. But and now that makes me realize, like, okay, well, that's one place that I've been to, I haven't written about yet. So, like, I do have a list of these places that, like, I haven't explored yet, but I've already been to. So that's kind of how I, like, honestly, like, I could not travel for the next 5 years, and I'll still have a lot of places to write about.
I'm excited for you because we cannot travel. So your
Yeah.
books are taking me to a different place. Like, I'm reading the One Hot Italian. And I'm like, I'm in
Yeah.
Italy. Like, this is just like, it's just like perfection.
Yeah, that I felt the same way when I was writing it. Like, it was so much fun to write because I was literally there. And again, like, I've been to the villa that they're at, Villa Rosa. That's actually has another name in real life, but it's an actual place. And I stayed there, and we did a lot of things that they did in Lucca. And we went to the island of Elba, and we did all these things. And so that made its way into the book, obviously. But it was so nice to just kind of revisit it, and like just
Mhm.
pull up all my memories, and I could just be immersed in it. And again, so that was definitely, if it was an escape for you, it was also an escape for me.
Oh, this is so good to hear. So let's talk about soccer, because you have a couple books. You have three books in the soccer world, and there's like actually like real soccer teams. So or football. What was the research process like for that?
Oh, okay. So I when I wrote Love in English, I did some research, but like not a huge amount. But what's interesting is in Love in English, I did the program that Vera did, and so in real life. And
Mm.
so at the time, I had a boyfriend, total dick, and he's Scottish, but he's not at all like my Scottish guys, so don't worry about that. Um, and he was totally into soccer, and I forget what his stupid team was, but anyway, so I knew about some of it through that, and then so when I was writing Love in English, it kind of reminded me like, okay, yeah, I remember the soccer that my ex-boyfriend was talking about at the time, and but he didn't really do too much soccer, so I just kind of did some light research, and then when it came for the Forbidden Man and the one that got away, especially for the Forbidden Man, like I did a lot of research, like at
Mhm.
least a month's worth of, and I still got some things wrong, but I mean it's impossible not to when you don't understand every single thing.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I did a hell of a lot of research for that. I watched so many games, and I got all these sports subscriptions just to watch Real Madrid games on my phone, and so like, and I still like get all the updates for them and everything, so I still will watch it, because they're kind of like my de facto team now, because I have like their merch and I have know so much of their history because I was trying to stay as true to them as possible, but also fictionalizing it at the same time. So it is kind of like a mix of that, and some there. I mean, I took liberties too. Like there's some things I knew that weren't necessarily correct when it came to championship leagues and stuff like that, but I decided to take fictional liberty with it anyways because it is fiction and why not.
Yeah.
But no, it was a lot of research.
Yeah, it noticed. I as someone who's like familiar, like widely familiar with it, I was like, oh, I'm immersed in a whole different world. Like, and I really loved it. It was like breath of fresh air. Like it was just football. Like it's
Yeah.
not regular, like it's a different sports romance. And like, and then it felt that it was actually unique to where it's located. Like you're in
Yeah.
Europe, you're traveling to these places and you have all these different teams and there's all these different things that happen. So I really
Hmm.
so let's talk about what are some of your upcoming projects? You mentioned a little bit about your Berkeley title, so it's a rom com. Is that what you're writing now, or?
Yeah, so it's called The Royals Next Door, and it should be out next year.
Ooh.
Um, let's see that, and that's a rom-com that's basically inspired by Meghan and Harry, but it's different because it's Royals adjacent, so it's set on Salt Spring Island, which is where I live in British Columbia, and
Mhm.
as you know, Meghan and Harry moved to the island next door to mine, and so in a
Really?
way yeah, that's where they were for I don't know when they got there, but earlier this year anyways, and so they look like they're moving there permanently. Well, they're renting a house, and anyways, I was just fascinated by the neighbors and what they were doing to protect them, but also thinking like, what a shit show this town's turning into because of them.
Mhm.
So I had the idea of like, what if there was a neighbor to them who shared a property with them basically, and how does her life get turned upside down? This quiet, not necessarily shy, but keeps to herself, school teacher on the island who lives with her mother, and takes care of her mother. So I thought, what would it be like for her if, and she's a huge romance reader, and she actually has a romance podcast too, but it's anonymous, so that people from the island don't figure out that she has one. Um, and so the royals move next door to her. So they're basically, Meghan and Harry, except in my book, they're Monica and Eddie, and they have a bodyguard called Harrison, this very brooding, kind of rude British. He's Tom Hardy essentially. Everything's
Mhm.
Tom Hardy, but he's Tom Hardy with his aviator sunglasses and his like stiff demeanor. And anyways, so she and him actually end up striking a enemies to lovers type relationship and falling in love. Which is obviously kind of forbidden in a way, and all these things. So that's that rom com.
So let's go to our book recommendations. This is an opportunity to share with the audience what they should read next. What is your favorite genre?
Oh, I don't have one.
Okay.
I know but I really don't. I
That's
really
okay.
love science fiction, so I suppose my favorite genre is science fiction.
Okay.
Um, but yeah.
That's really cool. So what has been a book you read this past year or last year that you cannot stop gushing about?
Oh, actually, I did read Heart Bones by Colleen Hoover.
Hmm.
And as usual, Colleen wrote an amazing, great story with really important, uplifting themes. So I can definitely recommend that. Let's see, what else did I read? I, I mean, if I want to go talk about books that have to do with science fiction books, I would definitely say I think it was last year, I read a whole bunch of science fiction books. So just things like let's see, Neil Stevenson. He wrote a book called Seven Eves, and it's a really huge, like 1,000-page science fiction story set in a space station. Basically, it's basically like one day the moon blows up and like Earth is trying to figure out, and you never figured out why it did. Anyways, it's a science fiction story set about the moon blowing up and a bunch of scientists and regular people. What happens to the world after that without the moon? And so that was really fascinating novel. And I read another book of his, another like 1,000 pages. It was like I don't even remember the name. What's it called? Like Dodge or Burn in Hell or something. But that was another. I can't even explain what the plot was. It's just total, you know, mind fuck kind of thing.
I love
So I was doing that, and then Blake Crouch. Okay, so he does. You'll see his books in the top 100 a lot. So
it.
he had. I read one of his called. I think it was called Resurgence. I'm not sure. That was kind of like a trippy time travel book, and then Recursion. That's what it is. That was like a time travel book, and that was awesome. I read another one of his called Dark Matter, which a few
Mhm.
years ago came out, and people were talking about it. So I finally got on that one. I would have to say that there's another book that I was doing. Shanann, or I can't pronounce her name, McGuire. Anyways, she's also a science fiction slash horror writer, and she wrote a book called Into the Drowning Deep about killer mermaids, basically. It was awesome. So that was really good. But as for like romances, I'm trying to see what romance. I know that there is one that I've read recently that I really loved, and of course my mind's gone blank, so I can't actually remember it. But yeah, but some of my favorite authors are like Christina Lauren and um people like that. So, every time they have a new romance that came out yesterday
Yeah,
or
they did.
Tuesday on the holidays. So I can't wait to read that. And I picked up a lot of traditional stuff. So like The Roommate by Rosie Danan, I heard that's really good.
Mhm.
And, I heard I think that's being made into a film too. So
Mhm.
it's just a lot of things like traditionally I've been trying to read just to kind of like especially from Berkeley since they're my publishers now.
Mhm.
I love like they did the Kiss Quotient. My editor did that book,
Mhm.
and I loved that book too. So I guess kind of like depends on my mood. I'm a huge mood reader. Currently, I just started reading Dune, so I was like, I need to read this book before the movie comes out this Christmas. Now they're like, oh, it'll come out October 2021. I'm like, okay, so do I keep reading this book or do I put it down and try again next year?
Oh my God. That's awesome. So tell us where you can find you online.
Where to find me online?
Yep. Yeah, website or Twitter.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't go to Twitter unless you want to hear me rant about politics. But if you want to find me where I am the most, probably, or the site that I enjoy the most is Instagram. So Instagram is actually my main place that you could come into contact with me. It's always good vibes there, and I take a lot of photographs. So I'm always having something to post, and I'm not really on Facebook at all because I don't like Facebook, but I do have a Facebook group that I go straight into. I don't actually ever go on my Facebook feed, but there's a Facebook group and it's called Karina Halle's Anti-Heroes. So anyone's welcome to go and join that group. It's very safe, fun place to be. That's about it. I really am just like an Instagram focused person, I guess I would say.
That sounds good. I'm Instagram focused too, so
Yeah.
I love following you. Awesome. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You're so welcome. That was a lot of fun.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Once you connect with fellow romance readers and make new friends, get weekly book recommendations, attend monthly meetups, then join our Patreon community. You can join at whatchrenextblog.com/Patreon. Romance lovers, check out Queen Bee Reads Etsy shop for cute and comfortable bookish apparel. The shop also features social justice apparel and fun items from some of your favorite TV shows like The Schitt's Creek and The Office. Use code WhatToRead10 to save. Visit whatyournextblog.com/queenbeereads. What Your Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Discover new podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.